This is the Retirement Solution Podcast with financial advisor John Hicks, founder of J. Hagan Capital.
There are so many things that we just have in our mind and we assume that they're correct because we've heard them 100,000 times. We got to get rid of all those myths. If you've done a great job saving, you'd be surprised what you can accomplish when you use the right strategies. Most people just aren't aware of them.
You've worked hard your whole life to earn and save. Now you need a plan to make that money work hard for you.
So people that have sacrificed opportunities to spend money, they sacrificed by putting the money in that 401k. They've sacrificed by putting that money in a 529 college plan for their grandkids. Those types of sacrifices should go rewarded in the long run.
John is here to help you find solutions for your retirement.
When I say the word frugal, what's the first thing that comes to mind in your head? I immediately think...
My grandmother.
I was immediately think grandparents.
Yeah.
Okay, so frugal
my German
lessons
grandmother,
from grandparents, go.
Yeah, my frugal grandmother from Germany, her mother spoke primarily German, and they grew up during the Great Depression.
Yep.
There was not a single recipe that she ever made that started with all new ingredients. There was something left over from the night before. The ham, the little bit of leftover ham, is what went in the green beans.
Yeah.
You know, the little bit of macaroni is what went into the potato salad. Like, there was always something, and I'm like, well, how come Grandma always put this in there? It's like, well, that's what she had from the night before.
Right.
You know, she would basically say, yeah, people didn't have the kind of wealth we have in America right now. And I still absolutely love going to old Western Kentucky potlucks because the way that they make food has a soul.
So different.
It has there's like a purpose to it. It just warms every part about you. And you all know what I'm talking about, where you know that Ms. Myers, the way that she makes that one casserole, and the whole point is, what does she put in it? It's a little different every single time because it's what she had in the house. Like, when I think about growing up in Owensboro, Kentucky, the two things that stand out to me the most was the fact that I love barbecue mutton sandwiches. I love them. It is some of the best food on the planet. And a lot of people say, well, it's gamey, or, you know, it's a lot of people, the way they think about venison or deer or whatever it is. But the two things that I absolutely crave because they have a soul was barbecue mutton sandwiches and burgoo, because they typically put mutton in the burgoo. Okay. And so, guys, what is mutton? It's basically the old goat, well, the old sheep, the old one that they actually use, and it's gamey. It's not the
tender,
the young tender meat, right? And in the French culinary arts, that was coq au vin. You took the old rooster that was old and terrible, and you soaked it in red wine for 2 days.
That's my favorite thing.
I know. And so when you think about like that home cooking food, that soul satisfying food, it was typically brought and born of a very frugal culture. And so my grandmother was raised that way. In our household, we never threw away a single piece of furniture ever. If it was broken, didn't matter. If they got it from JCPenney or it was pitched out of the backyard, it didn't matter. We kept it. And that was a family heirloom. You know, something that was in the back of a dumpster from the service merchandise. If you remember service merchandise,
oh my God, service merchandise
1,000 years ago. I know.
We are going back today, y'all. We are going back.
Old school. But that's when I think about frugal. You know, and I look at the world now, and everything's got to be new, and it's an inferior quality.
I know. We live in the throwaway culture. It makes me bananas. You just, even
ridiculous.
like, my mom had an appliance person come to her house to fix something, and he basically was like, listen, we can fix this, but honestly, it's just cheaper for you to throw it out and get a new one. He was just like, that's just how it works now.
That happened to my washing machine, which was a whopping 3 years old. I'm not going to name the brand. It was ridiculous. 3 years old, bought brand spanking new, and it wasn't cheap. And it's already burned up. And here's what the guy told me. And I don't mind saying this brand because he said, the only thing on the market that is going to do what you want it to is a Speed Queen. I was like, what? He goes, yep, and you're going to spend a lot of money for it, but it will truly give you 15 to 20 years. It absolutely will. I can go through just item after item after item that I've only had for 3 or 4 years, and they're kind of expensive, and that's all the only lifespan.
Cell phones. Are you kidding me? Cell phones. Every 2 or 3 years. Got to get a new one, another $800.
Well, they expect you to replace them every year. That's why Apple stock has done so great until, well, now. I mean, it just happens.
I love still reminiscing over the frugal culture that is. There's a whole Reddit thread about it, and they were talking about lessons learned from other frugal folks cutting sponges in half, which I think is smart because I always throw away a sponge. It's stinky before
cutting sponges in half?
You just cut them in half, and that way you don't I believe it. You use less. So by the time it's ready to throw away, you still have the other half ready to go because it's still clean. Or splitting meals when you go out, which makes sense because most restaurant meals are crazy. I always love, this is another grandparent one, the saving of the aluminum foil. That is a stamp of a generation.
I remember my grandmother always saved the wrapping paper during the holidays.
Yes!
Always during Christmas.
I'm just gonna say, ribbon. I'm going to save this ribbon.
And I have no idea if she ever reused it. I have no idea, she always saved. She's like, oh no, Jonathan, we can't throw that away,
When
baby.
your mom had to clean out that house, she found a box of wrapping paper and she cursed her mother's name that day.
I will guarantee it. I No, but I mean, I believe in that frugality. That's just kind of how we were raised.
I think
we didn't have any money. We had no money. We were broke as a joke.
But I think a lot of people across the Louisville area and Kentucky, the great state of Kentucky, probably feel the same way, especially folks that are in that age of retirement. I mean, we're talking about the baby boomer generation that were raised by the folks that lived through the Great Depression. We have all these lessons learned, but when it comes to frugality, that's one thing. That's fine. Be frugal. I want to focus on another thing. There are people you know and work and meet them every day in your office, John, who are literally afraid to spend their money in retirement. And this is the point of then, therefore, having the plan in place, the freedom to spend that we want to have.
Absolutely. So when you think about it, and I run into these people all the time, and what I have just kind of learned, or at least I've kind of adjusted my thought process to, is if you're wired to be a saver, then you're wired to be a saver. It is almost impossible. It's like pulling teeth sometimes to get people to realize, yes, you can afford to go ahead and have your landscaping trimmed.
Yep.
Yes, you can afford to take that vacation. Why? Because you're a multimillionaire. And this happens more times than not, Heather. More times than not. Someone has saved $800,000, $1 million, $4 million, and they don't even like to spend an extra $60 from time to time on something they absolutely need. So the thing of it is, and I get it. It's just how we're wired.
Yeah.
We don't want to be frivolous because you never know what's around the corner. We could have a rainy day. This current bear market could really, truly last much longer. We are in a recession. Maybe this does last another couple of years during this current administration. We don't know. And so when you think about that, there is absolutely a reason that we should sometimes be frugal, or at least not be wasteful, right?
Right.
I think the word frugality you can almost throw out the window to the majority of Americans now.
Right.
But let's just say, let's don't be wasteful, right? And I think it's almost a better way to kind of think about that.
Okay.
You know, we don't need to get appetizers and salads and full entrees and desserts because it all gets half of it thrown away.
Yep.
Which is absurd, right?
Yep.
So when you think about that, there are a couple of things that we can do. And I think frugality is really wise a lot of the time, especially during periods of time that we might be in right now. But let's talk about some of those things, especially because cutting sponges in half, Heather, I find that interesting.
I love it. I'm going to start doing it.
Well, I'm trying to think, how much is a sponge? If I went to the Dollar Tree, which now is a $1.25 tree because of inflation, we've increased it 25% because of inflation. But if you go to the Dollar Tree, what do I get? 3 sponges for $1?
Well,
so if
now
I cut
you
those in
get
half,
6
I get
for
6
$1.
sponges for $1. Okay, so I got 18 cents invested in each one of these sponges.
Thank you very much.
So when you think about that, that's perfectly fine. I have no issues with that. But guys, let's talk about the ways that we can truly be frugal, the things that we can really do. And this is a real story of a lady that I was looking at her portfolio this past couple weeks. So guys, I love when someone has a great story for investing where they've put some money in and over time it's just blossomed into a really great amount of money. And I rarely talk about investments, but I'm going to talk about this one today because a lot of people out there I found they own it. So she actually owned the American Funds Growth Fund of America.
Okay.
And she got it from her Edward Jones broker 30 years ago, 25 years ago, however long ago it was. And she held on to it, which was great. Loved it. Loved it. She paid a commission up front, but she's held on to it this entire period of time. But here's the thing, Heather, she held it in a taxable account. Now, why am I saying this? It has nothing to do with the quality of the fund. It has nothing to do with how it grew. By the way, she put about $20,000 into it, and now it's worth over $250,000.
Wow.
So that is fabulous. I love those kind of stories because that's how investing works in the long run if we give ourselves time for compounding. But Heather, when I was going through it, here's the one issue we found. Because that she owned it in a taxable account, which means that every year she got a 1099, Heather, she was paying phantom income taxes on that fund. And it was costing her, in this example, almost 2.2% a year to own that fund. Now, why am I saying this? Because Heather, in her case, it was over $4,000 a year that she was paying in taxes.
How long did she have it?
Over 25 years.
Oh, no.
So when I was looking through these numbers, and here's the thing, this is when you look through it.
Yeah.
Had she had something that was less costly, or if this fund had just been in the right account, what do I mean by right account? If it had been in an IRA, or perfect if it had been in a Roth IRA, that would have been fabulous. But it wasn't. It was in a taxable account. This fund over time has cost her almost 51% of her growth. Guys, what that means is instead of having $250,000, she could have over $480,000 in that account if she just had different tax treatment. So when we're talking about frugality, if we're talking about cutting costs or starting to get our budget in gear, or all the things that we know maybe we need to do, one of the best ways to be frugal is to not overpay on our investments. Now, I'm not talking about if you pay an advisor or even the fund cost, guys. Just having the wrong fund in the wrong bucket of money, in this example, can cost you $250,000 nearly over a long period of time. Is that a lot of money? Heck yes, it is. She could have twice as much money or haven't been able to spend that $4,000 or $5,000 every year. And she wouldn't have to cut those sponges in half, right? So when we're looking at what can we do to be better stewards of our money, we need to really understand what we're spending, if it's worth it, are we getting value for that expense, and to make sure we're tax efficient. Why do we think about these things? Because, guys, this is what billionaires do. Don't we want to behave like billionaires? Maybe not how lavishly we spend, but how wise we have to be to become a billionaire in the first place.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Solution Podcast with John Hicks. Begin the conversation about your savings plan with John and the team at J. Hagan Capital by visiting retirementsolutionradio.com. Be sure to listen to John's radio show, The Retirement Solution, Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. on News Radio 840 WHAS.
J. Hagan Capital Inc. is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if J. Hagan Capital Inc. is licensed in your state, please call 502-690-5635. J. Hagan Capital Inc. is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. It does not provide legal or tax advice. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through Jonathan Hicks, insurance license number 548962.